The Complete Works of William Shakespeare by William Shakespeare. Act I. Scene I. London. A room in the palace. Enter King Richard, John of Gaunt, with other nobles and attendants. King Richard. Old John of Gaunt, time-honored Lancaster, hast thou, according to thy oath and ban, brought hither Henry Hereford, thy bold son, here to make good the Boicerouse late appeal, which then our leisure would not let us hear, against the Duke of Norfolk, Thomas Mowbray? Gaunt. I have, my liege. King Richard. Tell me, moreover, hast thou sounded him if he appealed the Duke on ancient malice, or worthily, as a good subject should, on some known ground of treachery in him? Gaunt. As near as I could sift him on that argument, on some apparent danger seen in him aimed at your highness, no inveterate malice. King Richard. Then call them to our presence. Face to face and frowning brow to brow, ourselves will hear the accuser and the accused freely speak. High-stomached are they both and full of ire, in rage, deaf as the sea, hasty as fire. Enter Bolingbroke and Mowbray. Bolingbroke. Many years of happy days befall my gracious sovereign, my most loving liege. Mowbray. Each day still better others' happiness until the heavens, envying earth's good hap, add an immortal title to your crown. King Richard. We thank you both. Yet one but flatters us, as well appeareth by the cause you come, namely, to appeal each other of high treason. Cousin of Hereford, what dost thou object against the Duke of Norfolk, Thomas Mowbray? Bolingbroke. First heaven be the record to my speech. In the devotion of a subject's love, tendering the precious safety of my prince, and free from other misbegotten hate, come I appellant to this princely presence. Now, Thomas Mowbray, do I turn to thee, and mark my greeting well, for what I speak my body shall make good upon this earth, or my divine soul answer it in heaven. Thou art a traitor and a miscreant, too good to be so and too bad to live, since the more fair and crystal is the sky, the uglier seem the clouds that in it fly. Once more, the more to aggravate the note, with a foul traitor's name stuff I thy throat, and wish, so pleased my sovereign, ere I move, what my tongue speaks, my right drawn sword may prove. Mowbray. Let not my cold words here accuse my zeal. 'Tis not the trial of a woman's war, the bitter clamor of two eager tongues, can arbitrate this cause betwixt us twain. The blood is hot that must be cooled for this. Yet can I not of such tame patience boast as to be hushed, and not at all to say. First, the fair reverence of your highness curbs me from giving reins and spurs to my free speech, which else would post until it had returned these terms of treason doubled down his throat. Setting aside his high blood's royalty, and let him be no kinsman to my liege, I do defy him, and I spit at him, call him a slanderous coward and a villain, which to maintain, I would allow him odds and meet him, were I tied to run afoot even to the frozen ridges of the Alps, or any other ground inhabitable wherever Englishman durst set his foot. Meantime let this defend my loyalty, by all my hopes, most falsely doth he lie. Bolingbroke. Pale trembling coward, there I throw my gage, disclaiming here the kindred of the king, and lay aside my high blood's royalty, which fear, not reverence, makes thee to accept. If guilty dread have left thee so much strength as to take up mine honor's pawn, then stoop. By that and all the rights of knighthood else, will I make good against thee, arm to arm, what I have spoke, or thou canst worse devise. Mowbray. I take it up, and by that sword I swear which gently laid my knighthood on my shoulder, I'll answer thee in any fair degree or chivalrous design of knightly trial. And when I mount, alive may I not light if I be traitor or unjustly fight. King Richard. What doth our cousin lay to Mowbray's charge? It must be great that can inherit us so much as of a thought of ill in him. Bolingbroke. Look what I speak, my life shall prove it true, that Mowbray hath received 8,000 nobles in name of lendings for your highness' soldiers, the which he hath detained for lewd employments, like a false traitor and injurious villain. Besides I say, and will in battle prove, or here or elsewhere to the furthest verge that ever was surveyed by English eye, that all the treasons for these 18 years complotted and contrived in this land fetched from false Mowbray their first head and spring. Further I say, and further will maintain upon his bad life to make all this good, that he did plot the Duke of Gloucester's death, suggest his soon-believing adversaries, and consequently, like a traitor coward, sluiced out his innocent soul through streams of blood, which blood, like sacrificing Abel's, cries even from the tongueless caverns of the earth to me for justice and rough chastisement. And by the glorious worth of my descent, this arm shall do it, or this life be spent. King Richard. How high a pitch his resolution soars! Thomas of Norfolk, what sayst thou to this? Mowbray. Oh! Let my sovereign turn away his face and bid his ears a little while be deaf, till I have told this slander of his blood how God and good men hate so foul a liar. King Richard. Mowbray, impartial are our eyes and ears. Were he my brother, nay, my kingdom's heir, as he is but my father's brother's son, now, by my scepter's awe I make a vow such neighbor nearness to our sacred blood should nothing privilege him nor partialize the unstooping firmness of my upright soul. He is our subject, Mowbray, so art thou. Free speech and fearless I to thee allow. Mowbray. Then, Bolingbroke, as low as to thy heart, through the false passage of thy throat, thou least. 3 parts of that receipt I had for Calais disbursed I duly to his Highness soldiers. The other part reserved I by consent, for that my sovereign liege was in my debt upon remainder of a dear account since last I went to France to fetch his queen. Now swallow down that lie. For Gloucester's death, I slew him not, but to my own disgrace neglected my sworn duty in that case. For you, my noble lord of Lancaster, the honourable father to my foe, once did I lay in ambush for your life, a trespass that doth vex my grieved soul. But ere I last received the sacrament I did confess it, and exactly begged your grace's pardon, and I hope I had it. This is my fault. As for the rest appealed, it issues from the rancour of a villain, a recreant and most degenerate traitor, which in myself I boldly will defend, and interchangeably hurl down my gage upon this overweening traitor's foot, to prove myself a loyal gentleman even in the best blood chambered in his bosom. In haste whereof most heartily I pray your highness to assign our trial day. King Richard. Wrath-kindled gentlemen, be ruled by me. Let's purge this choler without letting blood. This we prescribe, though no physician. Deep malice makes too deep incision. Forget, forgive, conclude and be agreed. Our doctors say this is no month to bleed. Good uncle, let this end where it begun. We'll calm the Duke of Norfolk, your son. Gaunt. To be a makepeace shall become my age. Throw down, my son, the Duke of Norfolk's gage. King Richard. And Norfolk throw down his gaunt. When, Harry, when? Obedience bids I should not bid again. King Richard. Norfolk throw down, we bid, there is no boot. Mowbray. Myself I throw, dread sovereign, at thy foot. My life thou shalt command, but not my shame. The one my duty owes, but my fair name, despite of death that lives upon my grave, to dark dishonours used thou shalt not have. I am disgraced, impeached, and baffled here, pierced to the soul with slander's venomed spear, the which no balm can cure but his heart blood which breathed this poison. King Richard. Rage must be withstood. Give me his gage. Lions make leopards tame. Mowbray. Yea, but not change his spots. Take but my shame, and I resign my gage. My dear, dear lord, the purest treasure mortal times afford is spotless reputation. That away, men are but gilded loam or painted clay. A jewel in a 10 times barred up chest is a bold spirit in a loyal breast. Mine honor is my life, both grow in one. Take honor from me, and my life is done. Then, dear my liege, mine honor let me try, in that I live, and for that will I die. King Richard. Cousin, throw up your gage, do you begin? Bolingbroke. O God, defend my soul from such deep sin. Shall I seem crestfallen in my father's sight? Or with pale beggar fear impeach my height before this outdared dastard? Ere my tongue shall wound my honor with such feeble wrong, or sound so base a parle, my teeth shall tear the slavish motive of recanting fear, and spit it bleeding in his high disgrace, where shame doth harbor, even in Mowbray's face. Exit Gaunt. King Richard. We were not born to sue, but to command, which since we cannot do to make you friends, be ready, as your lives shall answer it, at Coventry upon St. Lambert's Day. There shall your swords and lances arbitrate the swelling difference of your settled hate. Since we cannot atone you, we shall see justice design the victor's chivalry. Lord Marshal, command our officers at arms be ready to direct these home alarms. Exeunt. Scene 2. The same. A room in the Duke of Lancaster's palace. Enter John of Gaunt with the Duchess of Gloucester. Gaunt. Alas, the part one had in Woodstock's blood doth more solicit me than your exclaims to stir against the butchers of his life. But since correction lieth in those hands which made the fault that we cannot correct, put we our quarrel to the will of heaven, who, when they see the hours ripe on earth, will rain hot vengeance on offenders' heads. Duchess. Finds brotherhood in thee no sharper spur? Hath love in thy old blood no living fire? Edward's 7 sons, whereof thyself art one, were as 7 vials of his sacred blood, or 7 fair branches springing from one root. Some of those 7 are dried by nature's course, some of those branches by the destinies cut, but Thomas, my dear lord, my life, my Gloucester, one vial full of Edward's sacred blood, one flourishing branch of his most royal root, is cracked, and all the precious liquor spilt, is hacked down, and his summer leaves all faded, by envy's hand and murder's bloody axe. Ah, Gaunt! His blood was thine. That bed, that womb, that metal, that self-mould, that fashioned thee made him a man, and though thou livest and breathest, yet art thou slain in him. Thou dost consent in some large measure to thy father's death, and that thou sayest thy wretched brother die, who is the model of thy father's life. Call it not patience, Gaunt, it is despair. In suffering thus thy brother to be slaughtered, thou showest the naked pathway to thy life, teaching stern murder how to butcher thee. That which in mean men we entitle patience is pale cold cowardice in noble breasts. What shall I say? To safeguard thine own life, the best way is to venge my Gloucester's death. Gaunt. God's is a quarrel, for God's substitute, his deputy anointed in his sight, hath caused his death, the which if wrongfully, let heaven revenge, for I may never lift an angry arm against his minister. Duchess. Where then, alas? May I complain myself? Gaunt. To God, the widow's champion and defense. Duchess. Why then I will. Farewell, old Gaunt. Thou goest to Coventry, there to behold our cousin Hereford and fell Mowbray fight. Oh, sit my husband's wrongs on Hereford's spear, that it may enter butcher Mowbray's breast. Or if misfortune miss the first career, be Mowbray's sins so heavy in his bosom that they may break his foaming courser's back and throw the rider headlong in the lists, a caitiff recreant to my cousin Hereford. Farewell, old Gaunt. Thy sometimes brother's wife with her companion, grief, must end her life. Gaunt. Sister, farewell. I must to Coventry. As much good stay with thee as go with me. Duchess. Yet one word more. Grief boundeth where it falls, not with the empty hollowness, but wait. I take my leave before I have begun, for sorrow ends not when it seemeth done. Commend me to thy brother, Edmund York. Lo, this is all. Nay, yet depart not so. Though this be all, do not so quickly go. I shall remember more. Bid him what? With all good speed at Plashy visit me. Alack, and what shall good old York there see but empty lodgings and unfurnished walls, unpeopled offices, untrodden stones? And what hear there for welcome but my groans? Therefore commend me, let him not come there to seek out sorrow that dwells everywhere. Desolate, desolate, will I hence and die. The last leave of thee takes my weeping eye. Exeunt. Scene 3. Open space, near Coventry. List set out, and a throne. Heralds and attending. Enter the Lord Marshal and the Duke of Aumerle. Marshal. My Lord Aumerle, is Harry Hereford armed? Aumerle. Yea, at all points, and longs to enter in. Marshal. The Duke of Norfolk, spritefully and bold, stays but the summons of the appellant's trumpet. Aumerle. Why then, the champions are prepared and stay for nothing but his Majesty's approach. Enter King Richard, who takes his seat on his throne, Gaunt, Bushy, Bagot, Green and others, who take their places. A trumpet is sounded, and answered by another trumpet within. Then enter Mowbray in armor, defendant, preceded by a herald. King Richard. Marshal, demand of yonder champion the cause of his arrival here in arms. Ask him his name, and orderly proceed to swear him in the justice of his cause. Marshal. In God's name and the King's, say who thou art, and why thou comest thus knightly clad in arms, against what man thou comest, and what thy quarrel. Speak truly, on thy knighthood and thy oath, as so defend thee heaven and thy valor. Mowbray. My name is Thomas Mowbray, Duke of Norfolk, who hither come engaged by my oath which God defend a knight should violate, both to defend my loyalty and truth to God my King, and my succeeding issue, against the Duke of Hereford that appeals me, and, by the grace of God and this mine arm, to prove him, in defending of myself, a traitor to my God, my King, and me, and as I truly fight, defend me heaven. He takes his seat. Trumpet sounds. Enter Bolingbrok, appellant, in armor, preceded by a herald. King Richard. Marshal, ask yonder knight in arms both who he is and why he cometh hither thus plated in habiliments of war, and formally, according to our law, depose him in the justice of his cause. Marshal. What is thy name? And wherefore comest thou hither before King Richard in his royal lists? Against whom comest thou? And what's thy quarrel? Speak like a true knight, so defend thee heaven. Bolingbroke. Harry of Hereford, Lancaster, and Derby am I, who ready here do stand in arms to prove by God's grace and my body's valor, in lists, on Thomas Mowbray, Duke of Norfolk, that he's a traitor foul and dangerous, to God of heaven, King Richard, and to me. And as I truly fight, defend me heaven. Marshal. On pain of death, no person be so bold or daring hardy. I against thee, upon pain of life. Mowbray. A heavy sentence, my most sovereign liege, and all unlooked for from your highness' mouth. A dearer merit, not so deep a maim as to be cast forth in the common air, have I deserved at your highness' hands. The language I have learnt these 40 years, my native English, now I must forego, and now my tongue's use is to me no more than an unstringed viol or a harp, or like a cunning instrument cased up or, being open, put into his hands that knows no touch to tune the harmony. Within my mouth you have engaled my tongue, doubly portcullis with my teeth and lips, and dull unfeeling, barren ignorance is made my jailer to attend on me. I am too old to fawn upon a nurse, too far in years to be a pupil now. What is thy sentence, then, but speechless death, which robs my tongue from breathing native breath? King Richard. It booths thee not to be compassionate. After our sentence plaining comes too late. Mowbray. Then thus I turn me from my country's light, to dwell in solemn shades of endless night. Retiring. King Richard. Return again, and take an oath with thee. Lay on our royal sword your banished hands. Swear by the duty that you owe to God our part therein we banish with yourselves to keep the oath that we administer, you never shall, so help you truth and God, embrace each other's love in banishment, nor never look upon each other's face, nor never write, regreet, nor reconcile this lowering tempest of your homebred hate, nor never by advised purpose meet to plot, contrive, or complot any ill against us, our state, our subjects, or our land. Bolingbroke. I swear. Mowbray. And I to keep all this. Bolingbroke. Norfolk, so far as to mine enemy, by this time, had the king permitted us, one of our souls had wandered in the air, banished this frail sepulchre of our flesh, as now our flesh is banished from this land. Confess thy treasons ere thou fly the realm. Since thou hast far to go, bear not along the clogging burden of a guilty soul. Mowbray. No, Bolingbroke. If ever I were traitor, my name be blotted from the book of life, and I from heaven banished as from hence. But what thou art, God thou, and I do know, and all too soon I fear the king shall rue. Farewell, my liege. Now, no way can I stray, save back to England, all the world's my way. Exit. King Richard. Uncle, even in the glasses of thine eyes I see thy grieved heart. Thy sad aspect hath from the number of his banished years plucked 4 away. To Bolingbroke. 6 frozen winters spent, return with welcome home from banishment. Bolingbroke. How long a time lies in one little word! 4 lagging winters and 4 wanton springs end in a word, such is the breath of kings. Gaunt. I thank my liege that in regard of me he shortens 4 years of my son's exile. But little vantage shall I reap thereby, for, ere the 6 years that he hath to spend can change their moons and bring their times about, my old dried lamp and time-bewasted light shall be extinct with age and endless night, my inch of taper will be burnt and done, and blindfold death not let me see my son. King Richard. Why, uncle, thou hast many years to live. Gaunt. But not a minute, king, that thou canst give. Shorten my days thou canst with sullen sorrow, and pluck nights from me, but not lend a morrow. Thou canst help time to frow me with age, but stop no wrinkle in his pilgrimage. Thy word is current with him for my death, but dead, thy kingdom cannot buy my breath. King Richard. Thy son is banished upon good advice, whereto thy tongue a party verdict gave. Why at our justice seem'st thou then to lour? Gaunt. Things sweet to taste prove in digestion sour. You urged me as a judge, but I had rather you would have bid me argue like a father. Oh, had it been a stranger, not my child, to smooth his fault I should have been more mild. A partial slander sought I to avoid, and in the sentence my own life destroyed. Alas, I looked when some of you should say I was too strict to make mine own away, but you gave leave to my unwilling tongue against my will to do myself this wrong. King Richard. Cousin, farewell, and uncle, bid him so. 6 years we banish him, and he shall go. Flourish. Exit King Richard in train. O'Merle. Cousin, farewell. What presents must not know, from where you do remain let papers show. Marshal. My lord, no leave take I, for I will ride, as far as land will let me, by your side. Gaunt. Oh, to what purpose dost thou hoard thy words, that thou return'st no greeting to thy friends? Bolingbroke. I have too few to take my leave of you, when the tongue's office should be prodigal to breathe the abundant dolour of the heart. Gaunt. Thy grief is but thy absence for a time. Bolingbroke. Joy absent, grief is present for that time. Gaunt. What is 6 winters? They are quickly gone. Bolingbroke. To men in joy, but grief makes 1 hour 10. Gaunt. Call it a travel that thou taxed for pleasure. Bolingbroke. My heart will sigh when I miscall it. So, which finds it an enforced pilgrimage. Gaunt. The sullen passage of thy weary steps esteem as foil wherein thou art to set the precious jewel of thy home return. Bolingbroke. Nay, rather, every tedious stride I make will but remember me what a deal of world I wander from the jewels that I love. Must I not serve a long apprenticehood to foreign passages, and in the end, having my freedom, boast of nothing else but that I was a journeyman to grief? Gaunt. All places that the eye of heaven visits are to a wise man ports and happy havens. Teach thy necessity to reason thus. There is no virtue like necessity. Think not the king did banish thee, but thou the king. Woe doth the heavier sit where it perceives it is but faintly born. Go, say I sent thee forth to purchase honor, and not the king exiled thee. Or suppose devouring pestilence hangs in our air, and thou art flying to a fresher clime. Look what thy soul holds dear, imagine it to lie that way thou goest, not whence thou comest. Suppose the singing birds musicians, the grass whereon thou treadst the presents strewed, the flowers fair ladies, and thy steps no more than a delightful measure or a dance. For gnarling sorrow hath less power to bite the man that mocks at it and sets it light. Bolingbroke. Oh, who can hold a fire in his hand by thinking on the frosty Caucasus? Or cloy the hungry edge of appetite by bare imagination of a feast? Or wallow naked in December's snow by thinking on fantastic summer's heat? Oh no, the apprehension of the good gives but the greater feeling to the worse. Fell sorrow's tooth doth never rankle more than when it bites, but lanceth not the sore. Gaunt. Come, come, my son, I'll bring thee on thy way. Had I thy youth and cause, I would not stay. Bolingbroke. Then, England's ground, farewell, sweet soil, adieu, my mother and my nurse that bears me yet. Where'er I wander, boast of this I can, though banished, yet a true-born Englishman. Exeunt. Scene 4. London. A room in the king's castle. Enter King Richard, Green and Bagot at one door, Omeril at another. King Richard. We did observe. Cousin Omeril, how far brought you High Hereford on his way? Omeril. I brought High Hereford, if you call him so, but to the next highway, and there I left him. King Richard. And say, what store of parting tears were shed? Omeril. Faith, none for me, except the northeast wind, which then blew bitterly against our faces, awake the sleeping room, and so by chance did grace our hollow parting with a tear. King Richard. What said our cousin when you parted with him? Omeril. Farewell. And for my hard disdain that my tongue should so profane the word, that taught me craft to counterfeit oppression of such grief that words seemed buried in my sorrow's grave. Marry, would the word farewell have lengthened hours and added years to his short banishment, he should have had a volume of farewells, but since it would not, he had none of me. King Richard. He is our cousin, but 'tis doubt, when time shall call him home from banishment, whether our kinsman come to see his friends. Ourself and Bushy, Bagot here and Green, observed his courtship to the common people, how he did seem to dive into their hearts with humble and familiar courtesy, what reverence he did throw away on slaves, wooing poor craftsmen with the craft of smiles and patient underbearing of his fortune, as 'twere to banish their affects with him. Off goes his bonnet to an oyster wench. A brace of draymen bid God speed him well, and had the tribute of his supple knee, with "Thanks, my countrymen, my loving friends," as were our England in reversion his, and he our subjects' next degree in hope. Green. Well, he is gone, and with him go these thoughts. Now for the rebels which stand out in Ireland, expedient manage must be made, my liege, ere further leisure yield them further means for their advantage and your highness' loss. King Richard. We will ourself in person to this war. And for our coffers, with too great a court and liberal largess, are grown somewhat light, we are enforced to farm our royal realm, the revenue whereof shall furnish us for our affairs in hand. If that comes short, our substitutes at home shall have blank charters whereto, when they shall know what men are rich, they shall subscribe them for large sums of gold, and send them after to supply our wants, for we will make for Ireland presently. Enter Bushy. Bushy, what news? Bushy. Old John of Gaunt is grievous sick, my lord, suddenly taken, and hath sent post-haste to entreat your majesty to visit him. King Richard. Where lies he? Bushy. At Ely House. King Richard. Now put it, God, in his physician's mind to help him to his grave immediately. The lining of his coffers shall make coats to deck our soldiers for these Irish wars. Come, gentlemen, let's all go visit him. Pray God we may make haste and come too late. All. Amen. Excellent.